in a new series today, actually. We're in a new message series. It's called Sacred Rest, and it's going to be a 7-part series, and we're going to talk about Sabbath. I'll get into it a little bit more. Sorry, the rain is distracting me. It's so peaceful. It's fitting, I guess, maybe today, because we're doing Sabbath. It's a 7-part series, and we're going to talk about Sabbath, and I want to just kind of make some general blanket statements before we get into it. One is, I will not claim at any point during this series that I am the guru, the master of Sabbath, of resting. It's something that I'm still learning. So there's that. Another thing is I want to acknowledge that there are people in here who are in different stages of life. And so Sabbath is going to look different for you. It's going to look different to me. It's going to look different to the people around you. There are people who are, we've got families, young families here, with stay-at-home parents. You've got young families here who both parents are working. You've got single parents here. You've got co-parents here. You've got retired people. You've got people nearing retirement, empty nesters. And so Sabbath and rest is going to look different for each and every one of you all, and I want to be respectful of that. And so I'm not going to say this is the best way to do it based on what I do or what I've heard. I'll allow you to interpret that. And so the last thing I just want to say is some of you may hear the word Sabbath, and it's kind of an older word, and you may hear it, and it might bring back some like PTSD moments, because maybe you grew up in a home where Sabbath was Sunday, and you did nothing on Sunday, and if you even thought about doing something on Sunday, there were consequences for that. Quick story. So my dad grew up in Holland, Michigan, which I think is the Mecca of Sabbath, or the birthplace of it, maybe. But he grew up in Holland, Michigan, but he grew up not attending a Christian Reformed church. He grew up attending a Methodist church. And so in the Methodist tradition, Sunday was just a regular day. But in the Christian Reformed church, Sabbath, you did nothing on Sundays. And so my dad has stories of growing up in Holland, riding his bike on Sunday afternoons, and people pulling over on the corner, like driving home from church, and they would pull over on the corner of 16th and Van Raalte, where my dad lived. They would get out of their car just to yell at my dad and his 2 siblings for riding their bike on the Sabbath. And my dad always, as he tells the story, he always is like, "What's the Sabbath?" No idea. And so I just want to lay those kind of general statements out, that my hope over these next few weeks is that we together begin to try to grasp and understand what is Sabbath, why does God give us this idea of a rest, and let's kind of rediscover it together, especially in a world that is busy and seems to keep getting busier and busier and busier. So the text for today, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 2, and we're just going to look at 3 verses 1 through 3. Kind of setting the table for our study on Sabbath is looking at when Sabbath is established by God. And so I'll be reading our text for today. So again, this is Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their vast array. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the 7th day, he rested from his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. So I know that I've said just a second ago some introductory statements. I want to dig a little bit deeper into this. So the one is this, is just some opening observations about life as we know it today, right? Why does this series seem valuable for our time here, not just here in Rise Up Church, but here in our world, in our history today. And I think part of it is because, and as I said earlier, life is speeding up, and it continuously speeds up. And we can even trace this through history. But if we think now, just the here and now, we are in a time in human history where we are always connected. all right? Like right now, I kid you not, my watch is going off right now. It's ringing right now. I'm always connected. I'll call that person back after church. I was not planned. Holy cow. That was providential. But the fact that this smartwatch on my wrist notifies me. I'm constantly connected. I have a phone in my back pocket. Well, it's actually over there in my phone's usually in my back pocket. It's in my backpack right now. I am always connected. The fact that I and many of us don't have boundaries anymore. Like I remember growing up, you didn't call someone's, first off, their landline that connected to their home. You didn't call after 7 or 8 o'clock. Unless it was an emergency, because that was considered sort of rude. Now, it's normal for me to text people, maybe even call them at 10 o'clock in the evening. And sometimes the expectation is they're going to get back to me. And that's because our lives and our world continue to speed up, and they've been speeding up for a while. That work has overflowed into the home because of things like working from home, that these boundaries between work and home have been kind of become a bit more muddy and not as clear and defined, that even moments of silence are uncomfortable. It's only been 10 seconds. Anyone feeling a little uncomfortable right now? It just shows you how rest and Sabbath are a challenge for us now. And again, this wasn't expected. This wasn't something that we think would happen. And so what I want, our big idea, both for really the series but for our time today, is that Sabbath isn't just, though, taking a break. It's not a break from work. It's actually God inviting us to experience trust and peace and joy with Him. That's what Sabbath is. That's what rest is. Now, like I said, this isn't what we imagined, right? We didn't think about this even 100 years ago, right? If we were to think back in the early 1900s, all right, the pace of life, this is what it was like in the early 1900s. And again, these are some broad ideas, but there was slower communication. There were these clear boundaries. In the early 1900s, you didn't have smartphones or email or watches. You would make phone calls or you would write a letter. It would take time to get there. That when you went to work, you went to work. And when you left work to go home, you left work at work and you went home to be with your family or your grandkids or your friends. And life kind of had a rhythm to it, a very strong rhythm to it. By the early 1900s, the 1950s, 60s-ish, we saw this progression in technology. Some of you may be able to remember some of these, the first computer. Maybe even before that, the very first appliances, dishwashers, washing machines, microwaves, television, had the big dial, I remember those. And the whole idea with this advancement in technology, whether it was from appliances to, in the case of, bag phones or cell phones and email, was the whole idea was, right, that if we can do this, life, as we know, will become much more leisurely and relaxing. Because we will find things that will make our lives easier. We'll find things that we don't have to, that we can put instead of making a full-on meal, we can put a meal in a microwave and cook it, and then we'll have more time with our family. Or that instead of me having to wash all the dishes, I can put all the dishes in the dishwasher and they'll do it for me, and that will give me more time to relax. And that's what the promise was, and maybe we saw glimpses of it early on. But like many things just kind of kept speeding up. And by the time of today, in our modern era, as I said, we have this constant connectivity, right? Smartphones and internet. We have this ability to get a hold of someone immediately. That work is no longer this defined boundary that we take work with us. We work remotely or we work from home. And on top of all of these things, we live in a world of endless endless stimulation. If you are a parent of a young person, like a child, an infant, or you are a grandparent, you can see this even now. If you give them a phone, like a cell phone, they will figure out how to use it. The stimulation wires their brains to figure things out quickly and more faster. And we could say there might be some good to that, but there also probably are some disadvantages to this sort of endless stimulation. And today what we see, and if we were to trace this kind of line through history, is that many people feel more today exhausted than ever before. In light of all the technology and all the advancements and all the things we've done to save time, we feel more tired now than we ever have. That we created these machines so that we could rest. And I think in some ways it feels like we've created a machine that runs us, that we've kind of become almost machine-like, that we just keep going and going and going. That we live in what I would call a culture of hurry. Because you're always reachable and you're always distracted. You're always behind or you're always tired. I mean, can any one of us at least pick one of those things on that list and say, that's me? You might be able to say, I'm all four of them at some point or another. I've been reading this book to sort of as a companion to this series, and I sort of invite you all if you're curious about it. It's a book by John Mark Comer. He's a pastor. Part of his story, he was a pastor at a church on the West Coast in Portland, a church that started in a home and within the course of a few years grew to 7 different sites and about 6,000 members. And the church grew so fast, so quickly, that he found himself unable to rest and to slow down. And so he wrote this book in light of that. And it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And there's a couple quotes in the book that relate to this idea of a culture of hurry that come from this book. One of them is that hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. That if we want our spiritual life to grow, to foster, if we want our spiritual life to flourish, the biggest thing that's standing in the way of that is hurry, is busyness, is the constant go. And that he says in another place that love, joy, and peace are incompatible with hurry. Love, joy, and peace are part of the spiritual fruit that as Christians we are called to bear. So what I want us to be able to reflect on over these next few weeks is that as we talk about Sabbath and as we talk about rest, it may seem very practical for us to maybe open up our calendars and sort of say, okay, well, how can I remove some of the appointments or the busyness in my weekly schedule to have more rest? That could be a very practical step. I think a better way to think about this is how does the fact that we live in this hurried, busied pace of life, how is that shaping us as people, but more specifically, how does that shape us as those who are called to bear the image of God? How are we communicating in the world around us who God is based on our pace of life? And that's where I want us to be able to look then at our passage in Genesis 2, right? Because what we would see is, and it should maybe shock us, that God calls us to rest. That thus the heavens and the earth were finished and God rested. And he rested because his work had come to completion. He didn't rest because he was tired. He wasn't resting because he was weak. He was resting because God realized that resting is a part of design. It's a part of the way we are wired to be. That we're not machines, we are created beings who are created to mirror, to reflect the image of God in the world around us. And he didn't create us as robots or machines that are meant to always work. He created us as beings that are also meant to rest. And this is sort of the way that the best way that I sort of can understand this is if you've ever watched an artist, you can watch them, someone doing a painting, let's say, right? Or someone sculpting something, right? When they get done with their work, sculpting or painting, they will often step back from whatever it is they're doing. When they step back from that thing, they're not doing it because they're tired. They're not stepping back because they're weak or exhausted. They're stepping back because they want to look at what they've created and enjoy it, to take in the beauty of what they've made. And that's how I envision God on the seventh day. When he rests from his work, it allows him to take a step back and see all the things that he has created and to enjoy them, to delight in them, to reflect on them and say, this is good. And I think the challenge for us today is that we don't know how to step back. We don't really know how to stop, right? We don't know how to remove ourselves from whatever it is and just be present. That even the thought of stepping back from work or from home or from chores or from school, it creates even within us just the thought, there's this stress and anxiety kind of starts to bubble up, right? That everywhere I turn, even if I step back, there's something else that's going to grab my attention and distract me from being able just to enjoy the moment I'm in. And so it's important for us then to realize that God, when he steps back and he creates this time for us, time for creation to step back and rest, he's doing something that actually he can do, and he creates time, and he actually makes time holy. I read this as one of the commentaries on this passage, and I thought I never had noticed this, but the first thing that God calls holy is time. What I mean by that is that the Sabbath, when we think about the Sabbath or you think about this idea of rest, we may think of it through the lens of the Jewish synagogue or Jewish life or the rhythm or priests or sacrifices, and that this idea of rest comes from those things. Rest and time to rest was something that God himself created, and he actually said it's holy. It's sacred. It's meant to be elevated higher than other things in life. That rhythm, a healthy balance and a healthy rhythm are holy and sacred things. And that resting and taking a Sabbath break, it reminds us that we are created beings, made in his image and his likeness, that we're not machines meant to go and go and go and go. And again, this is the challenge, right? Because the culture around us tells us the opposite, right? The culture around us says you need to work more. You need to produce more. You need to optimize your time. You need to become as efficient as possible so you can get as much done as possible. And I think the false dream it sells us that is if you can do those things, then you'll be able to rest. But often, we never seem to get to the resting part. Because we're just told, well, you've saved a little bit of time there. You could use that extra time to do even more work. And then if you save a little bit of time there, you can even do something more and do something more. The way that I saw this in my life was a few years ago. I was cleaning, I was organizing my garage. I do that every season or so. I was organizing my garage, and I realized that I have a lot of hobbies. I had fishing poles, regular fishing poles. I had fly rods. I had tackle boxes and fly boxes. I had golf clubs. I had a compound hunting bow. I had camo. I had baseballs, footballs, hiking shoes, snowshoes. I had all of these things that I accumulated over the years. And the reason I grabbed those things is because I thought, you know what, I'm gonna create a little bit more time for myself so I can start a new hobby. The funny thing is out of all those things that I had, I donated or gave most of them away. In my mind, I thought I could work harder, work faster, work smarter, whatever it was, and I'd have more time to do whatever that thing is, and I never got to do that thing. And that pair of snowshoes or that hunting bow or that new baseball mitt, those were all the dream that I had hoped to do, and I never got to them. And what I've learned about Sabbath, what I've learned about rest in my own life, and what I hope that we can grow in together is that in a world that tells us to produce more and optimize your time more, to become more efficient so that you can give a little bit more of yourself, what Sabbath tells us is you got to stop. Not you have to stop, but it's okay to stop. It's okay to stop and take joy. It's okay to stop and enjoy that hobby. Enjoy that time with yourself or with your friends or with your family. It's okay to receive this gift that God has given us. The gift of rest, the gift of time. And in return, what it should do is should stir within our hearts this desire to worship Him more. I think if we can take steps towards that, what it teaches us is trust. That by stopping what we're doing, it's actually us trusting God. That by stopping and being still or being present in something other than what we feel like we need to do, what we're doing is we're actually saying, God, I trust you to take care of this thing. I was talking to Dave Van Harten. He's over in Children's Church today. I was talking about this particular idea. If God created time and He created rest for us, and He's offering it to us as a gift, why is it so hard for me to stop? And the way I sort of envision it is if I think about, I want you to do this with me. It's a thought experiment. Think about the person that you love the most. Maybe it's yourself, maybe it's your spouse or your partner or your kids or grandkids. Think about the person you love the most and imagine putting that person on a treadmill and you turning that treadmill on and they are jogging at a moderate pace. They're not running full speed and they're not leisurely walking. They're just kind of going at a moderate pace that they can handle. Now let's imagine that as time progresses, whether it's minutes or hours or even days, you begin to notice that they are getting tired, that they're starting to slow down, that their feet are kind of starting to drag. If you were there next to them, would you slow down the machine? Would you slow down the treadmill? Would you even maybe turn it off? Would you tell them, hey, I think you need to jump off that treadmill. You're looking a little tired. And the reason you would do that, or I assume so, is because you love them. You love that person. You don't want to see them tired or exhausted or at the very worst get hurt. And what I feel about this here, this idea about Sabbath and how it teaches is that I feel like sometimes I'm on a treadmill that weirdly enough I got on myself, and I'm jogging at this sort of steady pace, and God is there next to me and He's saying, hey, you're looking kind of tired, Ben. Why don't you jump off the treadmill and take a break? And my response to God is, Well, who's going to run on the treadmill then if I don't run on it? Who's going to keep the treadmill running if I get off of it? If I'm not on the treadmill and I'm off the treadmill and it's not running, well, something's broken then, right, God? See, deep down inside of me, my inability to accept the invitation that God is offering me to rest, to get off the treadmill, is me telling God, I don't think you can do what I can do, God. That I know you're God, and I know you have all the power on heaven and earth to create time, but I don't think you can. If I get off this treadmill, God, or if I stop work, or if I do not keep producing, you can't do it, and who else is going to do it? Who's going to take care of these things? Who's going to take care of these responsibilities or these tasks? Who's going to take care of my family or my community? Who's going to take care of me if I'm not the one to do it, God? And by stopping, by accepting God's invitation to rest, what I'm doing is also saying, God, I trust you. I believe you can do what I cannot do. That everything and everybody, they don't depend on me. That my dependence should be on you. That I'm not the one that keeps creation going. That you are God. It's the willingness to say, God, you've been taking care of this family, of this home, of these lives, even in the life of the church. God, you've been taking care of your church long before I got here. And God, you're going to be taking care of those things long after I leave. And so I'm going to learn just to be okay and trust you that you can take care of the things now that I'm in. It's the willingness to accept that. And that might be hard. That's difficult for some of us. It's difficult for me. Where John Mark Comer in his book, this is actually one of the very first passages he quotes in the Bible, but I think it helps us sort of frame this idea of Sabbath, not just as this Old Testament or God thing that God created, but that Jesus himself would echo and encourage also. And it comes out of Matthew chapter 11. This is Jesus. And I'm pulling it from the Message version because I think it reads better and it's a bit more, it's in our common language, but I think even the offer, the invitation is firm. Jesus says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn, I love this line, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. That Genesis, right, shows God giving us the Sabbath, giving us rest, actually creating it, and then Jesus echoes it, not just as a command, but as an invitation to go with him into this place of rest. And that what I would see is how we even could apply this to our own spiritual lives here today. Is that when Jesus takes this principled idea all the way to the cross, and as he is placed on the cross, as he's nailed to the cross, in our place, he cries out, "It is finished." And what I think about that of what is there's all these different ways we can apply that or think through that. But how I think about it in light of Sabbath and rest is that when Jesus cries out, "It is finished," what he's saying is, Ben, it's finished. You don't have to keep trying to prove yourself. You don't have to prove your worth to your friends or your family or your community or even to God by how much you work and how little you rest. Because the cross is the picture of rest. The cross is the picture of grace where God invites us to say, you know what, I'm finished with trying to prove my worth. That Jesus has done it for me in my place. That Jesus takes the principled idea of Sabbath and rest all the way to the cross, and that we no longer have to live our lives striving, exhausted and tired. We don't have to do that anymore. We can rest and say, God, you did it for me through Jesus. And that Sabbath rest points me not to just taking a break from work or taking a moment to rest. That Sabbath points us to the grace and mercy of Jesus. That we can trust him. So there's a very practical way I think we can start to do this. A very practical way that we can begin to live into Sabbath even this week, this idea of rest. These are rhythms that we can begin to build into our lives, into our week. And I'm not saying you got to do all of them. I would say maybe start with one of them. But these are these 4 things that I would encourage us to begin to start to do throughout these next few weeks together. 1, stopping. Just stopping. Stopping normal work. To take the thing, whether you are working a full-time job or you're a stay-at-home parent or maybe you're retired but you have other responsibilities or things, learning just to stop those, to stop doing those, to set them aside for a period of time. And as we learn to stop those things, then we actually rest. That we physically and emotionally and we spiritually, we rest. Maybe you're like, well, maybe you work like a labor job that's physically demanding, and so the physical rest is something that is easy for you to sort of grab hold of because that's a very practical thing. But maybe it's emotionally. Maybe you work in a job that is emotionally tiresome. Learning to stop and rest and set those things aside. I know, for example, like in our home. My wife, Kayla, she's a home-based clinician. She works for a community mental health. So her job is emotionally taxing and draining. And so for her, and I'm not saying this is what she has to do, it's what she's learning to do, is how do you take this emotionally draining job and learn just to set it aside and rest, to be present. It's a challenge, but it's work. And spiritually, I mean, some of you are like, I don't know how to rest spiritually because I feel like I'm just trying to show God that I am good enough. And I'm here to tell you this morning that you are good enough. The proof is in the person and work of Jesus. You don't have to keep working. It's already been done for you. So stop, there's rest. I'll be honest, when I wrote this one, delight, I was like, this is the hardest one for me, all right? Stop, rest, and delight. Enjoy God's gift without guilt. Ooh. How many of you hear this today, and you can raise your hand, how many of you can stop and you can rest, but when it comes to enjoying the thing that you're doing, you do it with just a little bit of guilt? That even though you've earned it, you've like worked hard, even if it's like you work for a job and you're like, this is my paid time off. Like my boss, my company give this to me. And while you're doing that, there's this little bit of you that's like, man, I could spend this day probably working on like a house project, or I could probably spend some time, with some people that I haven't seen. I went fishing with a good friend of mine on Friday, and I loved it. We didn't catch any fish. Bit of a bummer. But I loved it. I got to spend a few hours on the river, seeing bald eagles and blue herons and saying, here, fishy, 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 fishy. And I know that I need that time. I need that time away to break. But I'll be honest with you, there were moments in that time where I felt a little guilty. That I could be spending this time doing any number of things on my to-do list at home. But God calls us. He invites us to delight in the rest that he's offering us without guilt. Over these next few weeks, this will be the hardest one for me to try to sort of wrap my arms around. So I'll give you updates along the way. And the last thing is the idea of worship, to turn our attention toward God, that when we can stop and rest and delight, that what we ultimately do is we then turn to God and say, God, thank you. Thank you that you created this sacred time for me to set aside and just be. Thank you. Thank you for that invitation. In a world with all these other idols and gods that tell me to work, 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 do, thank you for just saying it's okay to stop. It's okay, God, for me to say, I'm going to let you take care of this for a little bit. What I think is really wonderful is the best place that we can start practicing that, even today, is the communion, is the Lord's Supper, is the table. Because this table is an invitation for you to stop, to rest, to delight, and to worship in God. So in a couple minutes, in a few minutes, we're going to do that together. But before we do that, reflect, relate, and practice, something for us to all kind of to chew on as we go on into this week. So a question to reflect on maybe this week is, why is it difficult for me to stop? What is the thing that makes it really challenging for you just to simply stop and be? A question to relate is, how we relate to others and ourselves is, what does my busyness reveal about me? What sort of things bubble up within me or come to the surface as I think about this busyness in my life? And the last thing that's something to practice is, what small Sabbath rhythm can I begin even this week? Again, stop, rest, delight, worship. What is one thing this week that you and me, we could just try to build into our weekly rhythm? So again, in just a moment, we're going to take communion. And here at Rise Up Church, one of the things we do with communion is it's kind of like a family, well, it's not kind of, it's a family meal. And so our Rise Up kids in a moment are going to come in and join us. And so they'll be coming forward with to take communion. And it's pastor style, meaning you'll come and you'll receive a piece of bread and you'll dip it into the cup of the juice. Now, when it comes to children participating in this, kids participating in this, we welcome the table to anyone of any age. We believe here that it's a family's responsibility and it's their call on whether their child is ready to take communion. But we see this as part of God's grace, is that God's grace gets extended to all of us, regardless of where we are. If you are at a place and you have children and you're like, I don't know if my kid can take it, or I'm not sure if they're ready to, and you have questions about that, you are welcome to come and talk to me. I'd be happy just to hear your questions, and I can't say that I can give you definitive answers, but I'd be happy to walk alongside you as you kind of determine where your family stands. So, but again, that'll happen in just a couple minutes. But why don't we end out this time, first off, in a word of prayer. So please join me in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for waking us up. And Father, we thank you for the gift of rest that you have created, the sacred time that you have set apart, and the time that you now have invited us into. And Father, thank you that you have also created us with different lives and different experiences and different stories and backgrounds. And so Sabbath rest will look different for each and every one of us. Father, ultimately, as we spend these next few weeks learning about and growing in our understanding of Sabbath and of rest, God, may it shape and mold us more into your image and your likeness, so that as we grow, we begin to mirror who you are, a God that created and set aside rest, a God that has invited others to rest. In a world that says go and go and go, you have said it's okay to stop. And that, Father, our trust will not be in what we can do or what our family can do or our coworkers or our community, that our trust and our dependence will ultimately be placed in your hands. A gracious and good God who loves to give good gifts. In this case, the gift of rest. Father, we pray these things in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and all God's people said, amen. If you're able to, I invite you to stand. We're going to sing, "Oh, Come to the Altar." After that, we'll begin communion together.